Hi, welcome to All About Ag podcast, where we share insights about the world of agriculture.
Whether you've grown up in agriculture, are a curious consumer, or someone just looking to learn more about the industry that feeds the world, this podcast has something for you. So tune in weekly to learn about current events, hot topics, and on-farm experiences. Hi, my name is Sydney.
My name is Noah. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about common misconceptions in agriculture.
So the first thing I really want to talk about is just a story of consumers that have approached me and talked about different questions with the ag industry that I really thought was just common knowledge. So the first one being when I was in high school, I was actually approached by someone at my high school, and I went to a fairly rural high school. There was like farm fields surrounding my high school. There was a lot of students that were in the ag industry and a part of our FFA program. And I still had someone come up to me and ask how hay bales were made. They didn't understand where hay bales came from. They thought that they just grew, because we do square bales back home. They thought they just grew in perfect squares, and then farmers just went out and harvested them. So that was a really interesting experience that I've had. And to kind of answer that question, to be honest, in high school, I was like, there's no way this is a real question. Like, they're pulling my leg. And so I was a little bit shocked, but I did answer the question and share something about that. But that's just like one testimony to how consumers don't always understand things about the ag industry that we really think are common knowledge, especially when you grow up in an ag community. Did you ever experience anything like that in your high school?
I'd say the whole chocolate milk, chocolate cow versus strawberry milk, strawberry cow, and how it's mainly younger kids, but still it's just like, how do you not know that obviously there's flavoring put into the milk? I don't know.
Yeah, and I
guess parents don't really teach that.
No, they don't. It's not really taught in schools either, like ag in general. No. And I've actually had adults come up to me and ask the same question, and I never know whether they're actually joking or if they genuinely don't know. Because agriculture is really not taught in elementary schools. I was lucky enough to have some STEM days that they included in my elementary school education. And I know some elementary school teachers that do weeks or units in their science section where they focus on agriculture, but otherwise it's not really taught in schools. So there's definitely a lot of misconception. Your high school is pretty rural, right?
Yeah. I graduated with a class of probably about 50 kids. And I think every single window you looked out in the school, you could see a cornfield. Yeah,
surrounded by cornfields. Yeah, so it was pretty rural school. So to even hear that there is just shocking. But yeah, so again, in the last episode, we talked about how my internship, my most recent one, was being a dairy ambassador. So that's a question that I see a lot. Another one relating to the dairy industry is a lot of people ask why baby calves, specifically in the dairy industry, are separated from their moms. And the biggest concern is that they think that the baby calves are being, treated horribly, and that their moms are just begging for the calf back. And to be completely honest, a lot of times dairy cows are not the greatest parents. Some of them are, don't get me wrong, and I've had some pretty good cows that are good parents and really care for their babies. But a lot of the times, farmers need to give them very individualized care and make sure that calf gets the best start on life. And sometimes the mom can't necessarily do that because obviously they've just had the calf, and sometimes it's their first calf and they don't know what to do. Just like any first-time mom. So yeah, it's really important for the farmers to take care of the calf. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that I've received. Another one is a question about what happens to the boy cows, or where do the boy cows go? And sometimes that's a question that someone younger asks, and that becomes very difficult to answer. The simple answer would just be,
steak.
Yeah, I guess, but you try to make it not sound so bad, but boy cows don't produce milk, so they don't stay on the farm where milk's being produced, and it's just hard to make consumers understand that, especially without that firsthand experience. A really but a statistic that's relevant to this topic is that we are now 3 generations removed from production agriculture. So that would mean that even someone's grandparents might not have been in the agriculture community. So 3 generations would have been removed. And obviously we know that back in the day, everyone used to be involved in agriculture. It was just a way of life and what you did. And so now to hear that is kind of a sad thing, that agriculture is being talked about a lot less. Yeah, another one of the topics that I want to talk about too was in college, I was approached by someone who asked me what those fan thingies were called. I was on a basketball trip, and it was a teammate from New York, and she had never seen like a
wind turbine.
Yeah, a wind turbine. She had never seen a wind turbine before in her life, and she thought they were just like fans out in the fields, like cool down the crops in the summer, which I thought that was very, very interesting because obviously wind turbines are kind of intermixed with agriculture, but their purpose isn't necessarily to serve the production of any sort of product. So that was kind of interesting too. Do you want to talk more about like the food label thing that we've been seeing a lot lately?
So kind of with going into that, it's people knowing what organic is, or like what organic really means, or some even are like GMO or non-GMO. I don't really think people understand like the full concept of that. Like with organic, it's not really how the animal was raised. It's more so like what the animal was fed, or kind of like things like that, like no antibiotics or anything like that.
Yeah, and I think like with organic too, like that's definitely a term that we've had for a long time. Like that's not something new, like lab-based meat or Beyond Meat or things like that. Like that's a term we've had for a long time, and consumers still don't quite understand. Like a lot of people think just because it's organic that it means the food is better for us, and that's not necessarily the case either, because an apple is an apple, and whether it's organic or not, I mean, it has the same nutritional value in the store, and so that's something important to remember. But my grandpa always used to joke, because he was around when the term organic first surfaced, the grocery store shelves. And so what they were taught was that if it has organic on it, that it's non-edible, that you're not supposed to eat organic food, because, there was just that misconception surrounding it. And obviously my family has heavy roots in the ag industry, so they were all involved in ag, but in commercial production, conventional ag. So the organic side of ag was kind of like the people that you weren't sure if they were really farmers, or, because that misconception was coming about when it first was acquired. Another story I want to share from my grandpa's perspective was, which this relates to a more recent debate actually, was that when butter and margarine, so when margarine was first created, they were fighting for, because there's like, I can't believe it's not butter, or butter that's made with like vegetable oil and stuff that's actually obviously not butter, because it's not made from cow's milk.
Oil or something.
Yeah, and so there was this big debate, and my grandpa was a part of the Oregon Dairy Farmers Board, and he helped to fight, which they failed because obviously there's the label butter on things like I can't believe it's not butter, but they fought to have that not be called butter. Because consumers do get confused very easily. Like if you're not on the farm, you're not producing that product, you don't see how it's manufactured or processed, why would you understand where it comes from? I mean, unless you have that curiosity and really want to ask questions, but that's very rare. So he was actually on the board to help fight that. And obviously they failed, and that was a really, hard time for the dairy industry, because they were worried that people were going to think that this vegetable oil spread was the same equivalent for nutritional value, for quality and taste as real butter. And so that was like a huge thing. But now more recently, there's been the debate, and there was a few years back, about calling like almond milk and soy milk. Yeah, because like what do you call, milk comes from a cow, that's the definition. Like there was
blended
a huge
almond
debate.
Water.
Yeah, so
that's basically what it is.
It's basically juice, right?
Yeah.
You squeeze oranges, you add water, you make orange juice, right? You make a paste out of almonds.
You add sugar.
Add sugar, add water, you have almond juice, right? But then that's not really juice either. So what do you call this alternative beverage, right? And so obviously it's milk, and that has hurt the dairy industry in some ways. Like consumers still, I get asked like, is almond milk, as healthy for you, or do you get the same nutritional value? And the short answer is no. The closest replica to real cow's milk is soy milk, and dietary guidelines actually do suggest soy milk, especially if you have some sort of like allergy or intolerance, or really just don't like the taste of real cow's milk and need that nutrition. But again, soy milk is all fortified and has additives that real milk does not have to have. So you're still drinking something that's processed more, or, it's not as natural. And milk is really like the most natural beverage on the market that is that healthy for you and has that many essential nutrients. So that's just something to think about too. But even when it comes to ice cream, like, isn't it there's a brand, what is it, Blue Ribbon or something? You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, it's not actually ice cream.
Yeah.
I
I can't
think
remember
it's
the brand
Blue
name.
Bunny actually.
Is it? Okay. Yeah, there's a brand that they don't put enough like dairy products in it.
So it's not actually ice cream.
Yeah,
But
then
it's still marketed as ice cream.
Right, and then when you're down the ice cream aisle, like you're not going to notice the difference. You're not going to look at that little fine print that says frozen dessert, or is that how they word it?
Yeah, it's frozen dessert.
Yeah, it's called frozen dessert, but you're not really going to look at that when you're grocery shopping. I mean, how many people really even read the labels?
None.
Yeah, like when people go grocery shopping, I rarely even see them looking at the price of the product, let alone, you know, like the nutritional label. So that's kind of interesting.
Per ounce.
Yeah. I was always taught growing up when you grocery shop, like we were never like huge organic people. We ate healthy and we always had a balanced meal, but it was never like, oh, we only shopped the organic aisle. We actually stayed away from the organic aisle because it was more expensive. Like we had, you know, middle class like income, and so when it comes to grocery shopping, like we never really bought expensive stuff. Like I remember being in elementary school and some people would have those like fruit roll-ups or fruit by the foot, and I was like, oh man, those look so good, you know, because we'd get like that'd be like a bougie snack to me, because we just got like regular, you know, fruit snacks or whatever, like, and that's even a specialty item that's not really a pantry staple, but yeah.
Kids show like cosmic brownies every day and just that's all they would eat. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's just a different way that you were raised, because now there's this term, I don't know if you've heard this, but it's called an almond mom. And it's basically where you only give your kids organic food or healthy food, and some even go to the extreme of like making their own pasta noodles, and they only eat, you know, your homemade pasta noodles, or you know, making like different food from scratch is basically what it is.
Mom.
Yeah, some would call it a helicopter mom, but it's called like an almond mom or an almond diet. That's like the term that I've heard, and I think there's others that are used, like a traditional. I think there's like trad wife, but I think that's a little different. That's like trying to have chickens and stuff. But there is like this like new wave of nutrition being at the forefront of some people's like regular lives, which that could be a good thing. But at the same time, if you don't understand the labels in the grocery store, then what good does it do?
Feeding your kid copious amounts of soy and not actual meat.
Yeah.
Probably going to be a problem.
Yeah. Too much of anything is a problem, right? And I think we're advocates for just like having a healthy lifestyle and a healthy diet, like something that is able to fuel your body and give you enough energy to like make it through the day, but also like understanding where your food comes from. We were talking just today about like the transportation system because of the whole trade talk that's been going on in the news. And it's just so interesting because there's oranges from California and oranges from Florida that literally pass each other on some interstate somewhere in the United States to get that food to other states in the US or even other countries, or you can go further than that. And there's, you know, fruits from Guatemala that are coming in and fruits from Florida that are shipping out to Guatemala. And, you know, sometimes it's just interesting because even knowing where your food comes from becomes even more difficult because there's all of this transportation system.
You don't realize how much of your life has been in a semi-trailer until you actually think about it, and then you look at all your household items, just not food itself, but everything has been either transported by semi or cargo plane or cargo ship. At some point,
yeah. There's a lot less local, and I think that's become the forefront of some people's minds because now there's more talk about supporting local and shopping local and wanting to actually get food from a source where you know where your food's coming from and how it's raised. And that benefits the smallholder farmers a lot because like my family specifically, like we in the summertime, we've got a nursery business, and so we'll produce like tomatoes and you know, squash and green beans and things like that, like household staples, vegetables, some berries, and we'll sell them in a roadside stand. And so the buzz surrounding local food and farmers markets and homegrown fresh food has really helped that sort of business. But when it comes to like commercial agriculture, it might hurt it in a way, but probably not enough to like close out all of their market choices. But it's still just interesting to know where your food's coming from. Even just buying like an apple in the store, like you can get the same type of apple and it can be from like 3 different places.
Yeah, and we actually went on an apple tour this last year with our ag group kind of at college. And they were talking about how apples sit in a freezer for over a year before they're ever even exported to any store or anything like that. So the apples that we're actually buying at the store are over a year old.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy to think.
Yeah, because it ripens later, they produce it later.
Yeah, and then they freeze them with like a wax on them, and then that was kind of mind-boggling to hear. But
yeah, and it's so interesting to me too, because there's a lot of like the shelf life for different foods is different. So like dairy products like milk, it can get to the store within 48 hours. So as far as shipping fluid milk, you know, every time you buy a gallon of milk that it's probably somewhere relatively local, like more local than maybe like avocados, for example. But then when it comes to things like apples, you can ship like crates of apples.
I mean, any sauce you think of, like that's probably nowhere near where you're at packaged, or any meat, spice, or stuff like that's just global. Yeah,
and another thing too with like the food topic that we're talking about today is like preservatives in food too. Because a lot of people think that, you know, maybe if you buy these fruit strips that are considered to be organic, that means that it's really good for you, but there's still all these preservatives added to that fruit strip because it has to be sustained and have a shelf life. And our food and technology, like food science, has gotten pretty intense, and they've been able to come up with like new types of foods, like ultra filtered milk that has like extra protein, or the core power drinks for the dairy industry. Or even just like ways to use the byproducts of food to create something that's, you know, not just waste in our supply chain.
Whey protein powder is literally, it was extra of something, and then they realized how to use, and then
created a new product.
Created a whole new product off of it.
Yeah, and so our food and science and technology like area impacts ag a lot, and I think people maybe don't realize that they're that intertwined. But just like knowing what you're buying in the grocery store, knowing what you're putting into your bodies is extremely important. But then also knowing that the people that are actually fueling our supply chain are farm families. Like there's 99%, I believe is the statistic, of farms are actually family owned. And so a lot of the food in our food supply chain is coming from some sort of family operation, which is a good thing to know and something to be proud of. That's something unique to the United States. Like there's other countries that percentage is way different. So that's something that's really cool to know. But just being able to take the time while you're in the grocery store and understand like, so this one almond had to come from, you know, it's like 5 gallons of water to make one almond or something. So it's like, man, like I need to cherish this and understand, you know, where our food's coming from. Or, you know, this avocado from Mexico or Guatemala, you know, it took all of that time to get here and likely was picked, you know, months in advance, shipped, and then ripened. So by the time it gets to your dinner table,
it's been months, and
it's been a long process to get there. And I think COVID-19 has helped to create that awareness, because there were blank grocery store shelves. They were bare. I mean, there was food that wasn't able to get shipped or processed, and so the amount of reliance we have on both transportation and the supply of our food is huge. We really wouldn't be here if farmers weren't able to produce, transport, ship, process, preserve the food for our food system. So that's our topic for today. Just some interesting conversations we've had with consumers, a lot of misconceptions. It just goes to show that 3-generational gap is a lot bigger than we think. You know, just because your grandparents didn't farm, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be clueless about the ag industry. Take that initiative and read your food labels, understand at least where your food's coming from or how it's produced, especially the simple food groups, the staple foods like your bread, your eggs, your milk, because those are staple food groups that we need in our diets to maintain our healthy bodies and to help support the ag industry. Is there anything else you'd like to add for today's discussion?
No.
All right. Yeah, I think that's everything. But just be aware and know that you don't have to be one of those consumers that don't understand or ask those silly questions. Although we would be happy to answer them, not all farmers are going to be happy to answer questions about, you know, how their food was produced. So take your time and learn that knowledge, because it's really good knowledge to have. So, all right, that's all for today's episode. We will see you next time. Bye, guys.